Hello and welcome to Game Design Hour. I'm your host, Miles Goldsmith. And on each episode of Game Design Hour, I sit down with the people who create the video games you know and love. On today's episode, I sat down with one of the game developers behind the video game The American Dream. The American Dream is a satirical VR game that brings you to a version of the 1950s where everyday problems can be solved with the use of guns. So without any further ado, let's hop into the interview.
Hi, Miles. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Winston Tang. Pronouns are he, him. I am the one of the directors at Samurai Punk, and here to talk about The American Dream, a VR game that we made. And on that game, I was the director, designer, and writer.
What was the first thing that really sparked your interest in creating video games?
So that goes back quite a bit. When I was just a kid, 7 or 8 years old, I loved cartoons, grew up watching kind of like Nickelodeon stuff and like anime, really was into that. And then at some point in my childhood, I got exposed to video games just through I think a friend had an NES. And in my head, it was like, oh my God, they're kind of like cartoons, but like you can play them and, there's like a challenge involved. And there are like secrets that you can find, and it really kind of opened the door to my imagination. And as a kid, I thought I would either want to be a comic book illustrator or an animator or a game developer. And I guess the dreams kind of stayed alive to various degrees. But long story short, my drawing wasn't that great. But I made some funky Flash games in high school, which I was quite proud of. So I decided, all right, I'm going to try to be a game developer. There are a few things that happened along the way, but I'll just kind of briefly mention I played a whole bunch of Little Big Planet on PlayStation 3, and the level creation tools in that was kind of my main exposure to building something beyond like a 1 minute experience in Flash. I made a couple of levels in that, and that was really fun, and it was really rewarding seeing people play and enjoy something that I made. Well, those things combined, kind of set me on my path.
How did you first come up with the idea for The American Dream?
Our studio, Samurai Punk, we started kind of right after we finished university, and our first kind of successful title was Screen Sheet, and that, for those that don't know, it's a split screen multiplayer shooter where all the characters are invisible, so you have to screen sheet and look at each other's screens. And yeah, that game did quite well for us, and the people on the team were pretty fond of like first person shooters, and yeah, we were quite proud that the game that we made was playable by like younger audiences because it's not super violent. But at the end of the day, it was a shooter. And I think there was kind of just a funny feeling about that. And as we kind of moved into our next game, I think the games industry was starting to move into a kind of, I'll say like reflective phase where game designers and players and the media were starting to question like violence in games. And it wasn't in the same level of like, does playing violent video games make you violent? But it was kind of like, is what we're morally asking players to do, like, is it okay? Or like, should we think deeper about this? And you were seeing games like, I mean, the big standout for me was The Last of Us and like Spec Ops: The Line, those games where they really questioned like, what is the role of the player's, I guess, agency in committing violence? At the time, I was also doing some teaching at university, and I was doing a game design and kind of philosophy class. And these were the things that we were discussing in the class. It's like, as a player, what does it mean to point a gun at, this artificial character, pull the trigger? Why are we so fixated on that particular gameplay loop? Why is it so effective? And the conversations around the office kind of went around like, everybody really loves guns. Guns are a great gameplay mechanic, but there is also this really dark side to them in reality. I mean, their origin is as weapons of war, like, and they're meant to kill and maim people. And yeah, I guess throughout that kind of environment, I think I had a thought, I don't know, I must have been playing like a Call of Duty game or something. I just found it funny that, I mean, the whole way through the experience, pretty much, like, You just have a gun pointing forwards, and if you're not pressing F to pay respects, you pulling the trigger to shoot something, and that's really your only way of interacting with the world. So it all kind of started when I just kind of pondered the question, like, if you were the guy from Call of Duty and all you could do was shoot things, how would you live your everyday life? I've watched a ton of The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons, big influence on me. And there's that great episode where Homer gets a gun and he's using it for just everything around the house. That kind of unconsciously like influenced me as well. But yeah, it was us reflecting on the nature of violence in games and this contradiction of us loving guns as this fictional object of power, being incredibly fun, but having this darker side to it. And then, yeah, just kind of poking fun at the whole idea and exploring the contradictions around it.
So the American Dream is such a unique and interesting game, and you talked about The Simpsons as a sort of inspiration for it. What other pieces of media inspired elements of the game?
American Dream is, I think, a bit of a like miracle of a project in some ways. Miracle in the sense that it's kind of rare that like you would get that much creative freedom to like express all the little weird inspirations and influences into one product. So I'll say it's pretty sporadic, but there were a ton of influences. So a big one for me, because yeah, I can speak for myself, and there were some other influences for other people in the team too. Big influence was Metal Gear Solid, and it's kind of a weird one, but it's mainly about it's the way that it is a very reflective franchise. And I think Metal Gear Solid 1 was one of the first games to question the player's role in violence. There's the bit where Liquid Snake is like, I don't want you to do this. You just love all the killing, or something like that. So it's very reflective, but it's also really silly sometimes. I really love that about it, and it wants to have something to say about games and about society and culture as a whole. BioShock, the series, the first one, and BioShock Infinite in particular, how they craft like these really over the top but kind of believable dystopias, because from real world thought and kind of it's this kind of projection of how things could go wrong. So we really took that on board when building out the setting of the American Dream. What else? There was there's going to be some deeper cuts in here, but I was quite influenced by there's a movie called The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky. So you might have heard from him from the Jodorowsky's Dune project. He was a cult film director who might have or was working on a Dune movie, but it never kind of happened. But movie that he previously made, The Holy Mountain, it's just like a bizarre acid trip of a movie that is wanting to send a message and get the viewer to think on their life and their kind of place in the universe. So with the American Dream, I guess I really wanted to get across the feeling of being on this surreal ride that makes you reflect on, a particular aspect of your life. And for the audience, it's like making you reflect on your role as a person who plays games with guns in them, and probably as a person who lives in the world with guns that, they may not be directly in your life, but they're in pop culture. And if they are directly in your life, to reflect on them in that way. But mainly I loved how surreal and just strange it was. Apart from that, because we were working in VR and we were in kind of the infancy of the medium, there weren't that many games that had been released. So there weren't many points of reference that we could use. But we played a couple of rail shooters that helped kind of get a sense for what works in that space. Yeah, what was it? Until Dawn, Rush of Blood was one that was pretty good. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Obviously The Simpsons. We took a lot of inspiration from 1950s artwork and just kind of war propaganda and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, directly in terms of like pop culture media, that was that. But I think it's also worth pointing out that as an Australian, I was honestly not that familiar with the gun debate in America. I had known bits and pieces, and I'd known that it was a hot topic, and that all we knew was that Americans loved their guns. The rest of the world were just a bit scared and horrified when they would hear about, things happening in the news. But yeah, I needed to get educated. So I read a bunch of books on the topic. I really had to get into both perspectives. I ended up watching a ton of like NRA promotional videos and like the kind of TV content that the NRA produced, which was very eye-opening. Yeah, took a bunch of pop culture, took a bunch of current events, news. Yeah, I think we looked at like a lot of Saturday Night Live comedy for how they tackle like contemporary issues. Yeah, pulled a ton of things. Yeah, there's a lot that we put into the game.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much every game that's ever been made has interesting ideas that someone thought about putting in the game at one point, but it just ended up getting cut. With a game like this that goes in so many different interesting and strange directions, what were some interesting ideas that you thought about for a level or a part of the game that you just never ended up implementing?
I think we were able to put in most of what we wanted into the game, but there are a couple of notable sections that got cut. One that I quite like, and I kind of regret that we couldn't get in, but there was going to be a level where I think it was after the character like buys their first house, and the level would be themed around doing chores around the house with your guns. And there were so many different things that you could do in a house setting, but the way that our game worked was that the player was kind of put into a single room at a time, but we wanted to like cover a bunch of different contexts. So we had this cool level. Rather than just being one room, you would kind of go into it and it would have 4 sections that would rotate to reflect different parts of the house. And you'd have to cycle through doing these different chores. And from memory, I think you got a submachine gun. So you were using automatic fire to like do stuff around the house, and you would get a bathroom where the toilet would get clogged, I think, and you had to like shoot the poo out of the clogged toilet. And then when that was done, it would rotate to the next room. And then I think it was washing the dishes, I think. And then, there'll be a pile of dishes and you like shoot all the dishes and just blast them out of the way. The next one would come, and I think it was your kid has to like brush their teeth. Oh no, you have to brush the teeth of the kid. And this was horrifying, but we had this like placeholder animatronic head that would like open up and it had all these big teeth, and you would have to like shoot the dirt out of the teeth. But this is at the point, slight spoiler warning, but like where the guns kind of start getting out of control. So as you'd be shooting the teeth, like the teeth would like blow out, and like the animatronic's head would blow up and all kinds of things. And then it would rotate again. And this one was great. It was, you're in the garage. It was your car, and the car was like, I guess you needed to fix your car, and you would do that by just like hammering the engine with your gun. But because it's like a dank garage, car hole, whatever you want to call it, we had like, as you were doing it, like spiders would crawl out of the walls, and this only existed in a prototype. But we made the spiders come out, and after a while, like you had to shoot the spiders as well, but they would jump onto your face. And I don't know about you and how you feel about spiders. I don't like spiders, but in VR, to have a spider jump onto your face, I had like a guttural, like full on, like just animalistic like response. As soon as it jumped on, I like screamed, and I like my hands just went and I like hit myself in the head with the controllers as I was like trying to get the thing off my face. So I thought that was great. Really immersive experience. Probably too scary. Yeah, because of all the other stuff and the shifting level. It was just too complex, but I thought that was really fun, and it scared the living shit out of me. Mm-hmm. My own game, so very proud of that at least.
Jumping back to a topic we touched on earlier, the research into the real world stuff that this game is based about. What sort of research did you do into the topic?
When we first started, there was a lot of comedy in the fact that we were an Australian studio using our like external perception of like guns. People thought like, hey, this is what non-Americans think that Americans think about guns. So that was kind of funny on its own, but like that joke I found didn't have enough legs to carry the full experience because I wanted like, we wanted to have a full length narrative, not just have a bunch of disjointed jokes. So I wanted to make sure that we were properly educated and up to speed. Here's the thing, like respectfully satirize the topic because I didn't want us to just be like making potshot stupid jokes. Like I wanted us to actually know the domain that we were like dealing with. So what did it involve? Watching bunch of documentaries, reading books about the history of guns in America, the history of guns in the world in general, catching up on like the debates that people would have, like podcasts and papers and news articles. Yeah, looking at a lot of the content that the NRA produces, and just trying to understand like the people who really love guns and treat them as like a cornerstone of their life. Because I don't know if you've seen it, but there's the pictures of there's some family, I think, and they're at a church, and I think everybody in the church had an AK-47 or something, and they had like a fucking crown made of bullets. I'm like, this looks out of this world, but I'm like, these people think about guns in a way that is different to the rest of the world. I kind of want to get into their heads a little and understand. Yeah, it was digesting and taking in a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, I think watching the material from the NRA was probably the most interesting. Not growing up in it and not being in it, we can never truly understand. But I'm just like that ideology and the people who think that way, they're born of a part of this system, and I don't blame them for thinking that way because as gamers, most gamers would kind of relate. Like guns are fucking cool. They're really fun to use in games. We put like a ton of love and attention to detail in the actual guns themselves in the game and trying to make them as true to life as possible. So like all the internals and stuff are like modeled, and like when you like fiddle with them in VR, you can like see the mechanisms in play. I think actually one thing that was really fun for research was buying the guns and ammo magazines and just seeing like, yeah, just the culture around that and like gun enthusiasts and the kind of things that they love and they value. And as I was flipping through, I'm like, Jesus Christ, this stuff is so cool, but like terrifying as well. But beyond that, we also were able to find gun enthusiast magazines actually from the 1950s. I guess they were collector's items, and we just found a couple on eBay and we bought those. And those were really, really cool because then, again, like it's a piece of a snapshot of history, but also like, yeah, it kind of shows that ever since guns were invented, they have been this incredibly powerful and resonant like force of power, I guess, that people have been drawn to. And there's this rich culture around them.
What was some of the strange or interesting or even scary things that you found in these NRA videos and other material that you were looking at that most people don't really see?
The most memorable was watching a video about I think it was somebody, I guess it must have been an NRA member who was recounting a story of a home invasion and how they like used their gun to shoot off the home invader. I mean, I guess they shot him. In describing the scenario, like, I mean, it's horrifying to think of somebody breaking into your house, and if you have like children and like loved ones in there as well. If they're at the mercy with someone with a gun, if you have a gun, like Like, you wouldn't not want to be equipped with a gun in that situation. I could totally relate to that. Because if you live in a country where a criminal can easily get access to a gun and take your family hostage, you would want to have a gun on you. Because you could try to call the police, but I mean, there's no guarantee when or how they will respond. But yeah, in this interview, I guess they described how using the gun saved their lives and the lives of their family. And obviously it's presented in an incredibly like pro-gun way, but it's hard not to relate to somebody in that situation where if somebody's coming at your family and you have a means to protect them, you want to be using whatever you can. But then the darker side to that as well, though, is that there's so much money to be made in the firearms industry that companies are incentivized to make you feel more scared and make you feel like it's more necessary to have these things. And, you move from the level of, I'm going to have a weapon to protect my family. Then you get to like luxury guns, basically, because flipping through the Guns and Ammo magazine, the guns are described like high-end watches. Like, they're beautiful, like, works of like engineering and craftsmanship and like artistry, like, but they're also designed to kill people. And yeah, like as a third party not being able to easily access guns, I felt it in my head, like what I'm looking at in this magazine looks super cool, incredible, powerful. Like, you just like, oh my God, like imagine owning this thing. But at the same time, I'm thinking somebody's standing to gain a lot of money from this, and the overall industry is kind of benefiting the more firearms are in circulation. But from that, it kind of becomes this, I guess, this feedback loop, right? The more guns there are, the higher the crime rate will be, and the greater fear there is, thus a greater need to, arm yourself. Like, that's the kind of far end, like, extrapolation that kind of my mind went to. But yeah, I mean, it made me feel that, like, I guess it's like conflicted, I suppose, because you can't make all the guns in the US go away overnight, because even if there were gun control laws in place, not everybody is going to give up their guns. And you don't want to be the person who gave up your guns when the bad guys didn't, because then you're screwed. So given the situation where the guns are just proliferated and they're very hard to get rid of on a wide scale, it's good that people can access them to protect themselves, but every, extra gun sale is just exacerbating the issue. So it made me a little sad and a little scared for the people living there, but at the same time, like, there's nothing that we can do about it. I guess I also felt that the rest of the world didn't have like a very clear image of the complexities of like the gun culture in America, because us going into it, we were just like, oh, Americans love their guns, yeehaw. But there was so much more to it. And I guess watching those NRA videos and reading through the magazines and stuff really opened my eyes to the other perspective. Like, these are people who are trying to protect themselves, and there's an industry that is trying to make, a ton of money from them because they can. And yeah, just kind of wanting to bring light to it and explore it through weird little comedic vignettes. Yeah.
Managing scope is a really important part of creating video games. How did you work to manage the scope of the American Dream while working on it? And how did the scope change from when you first started working on it to what you now have published?
Scope is always tricky. I'll say the game went over scope. We were a small team and we were pretty inexperienced, but we knew that there was like a certain quality bar and amount of content that we needed to hit, because when you make a statement like that you're working on a game like the American Dream, you gotta follow through, right? Like, if you're tackling a controversial topic, you gotta have the goods to back up, like, entering entering the debate. Yeah, it was really tricky, like kind of balancing the amount of topics and like perspectives that we wanted to cover in the game. Because, like I said, it was a really complex issue. There ended up being, I think, probably like twice as many levels as we originally envisioned. Because as I was learning more and getting up to speed with everything, it was more like, oh, okay, so this is a thing that exists, and this is another topic, and this is another topic. There was something really fascinating that I learned like quite late into development, which I thought like, oh, this has to be in the game. This can't not be in the game. And that was the level around the firearms tracing system. It's been a while. It's been a while, but basically there's like a very, very obtuse and deliberately obtuse system for tracing firearms where they have to, I think it's like the serial numbers have to be manually tracked. There's no centralized database or something, and there's just like a bunch of boxes with like paper records. Yeah, when I found out about that, I was like, oh, we got to put that in the game. Got to put that in the game because it's just a fascinating piece of like trivia on the topic. But everyone else on the team was like, oh my God, why do you keep adding shit to the game so late into development? But I'm like, we can't not include it. And there were lots of instances like that. So I would say we weren't well disciplined with the scope, and we went over. And the game could have been shorter, like in retrospect when we look back. But at the same time, like I just really wanted to make sure that we covered enough topics and brought enough, I guess, interesting points to kind of show people, yeah, what is kind of going on with the gun debate. So, advice for future self: do a ton more research during pre-production before defining the scope of the game, and then give yourself a buffer of at least 25% to go over, because games are just complex and things tend to go over scope. And then if you can, create a bit of wiggle room in your production schedule for like not last minute, but like kind of inspiration that strikes near the end, just so that you can have room to kind of play a bit.
Which part of the game did you have to put the most time and effort into to get just the way you wanted it?
The most love got poured into the early section of the game, because that was when we were finding the voice of the game and the tone. But also, those were the sections of the game that we demoed at conventions. So there we got a lot of live feedback. Yeah, we were able to see in real time what worked and what didn't work. And they ended up being some of the best parts of the game too. So this was in particular, it was the tutorial scene where you're a baby getting your first gun and you have to learn how to fire the guns, how to reload the guns. There's a great bit where your mum comes in and is like this giant like wooden figure to reflect the scale of you being a baby. But the mum comes in and is like, it's time for lunch, and she goes to feed you, but she does it by using a pistol as a spoon and like scooping this baby food and like pointing it down for you to eat. But being in VR, you're like embodied, so you have to like lift your head up and like eat it. That is already pretty strange, but like that moment in particular was great because people were like, oh my God, you're making me eat from off the tip of a massive gun. But yeah, we tuned that scene and the burger flipping scene, and I think the gardening scene a whole bunch, because they represented the game. They were what we wanted people to see, what we wanted the press to see. Took a lot of iteration. And then aside from that, the final act, I would say a lot of love got poured into it, but probably not enough time, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on at the end of the game, like slight spoiler warning, but there's like a car chase scene where you get to like blow up a bunch of cars and have this like high octane, intense like action sequence. There's a boss fight with like multiple phases, which I had a lot of fun developing, but like it was pretty rough around the edges because there was so much in those final sequences that we couldn't really polish it all. But I think that's part of where the Metal Gear influence comes in. Like, finish with a cool chase sequence, fight a massive robot, get some long exposition at the end, and that was really important to me because that was something that I loved from the Metal Gear games. We just did it in a slightly sloppy but passionate indie style.
Let's talk a bit more about that final level. Well, it was one of the strangest levels. It was also one of my favorites, and there were so many different weird elements to it. Was there anything you wanted to put into that final level that you just weren't able to?
I think we got most of it in because yeah, the thinking was it's better to get the stuff in and have it be a bit rough than not at all. I was really proud that we got to do the Willy Wonka thing where the car tunnel like twists around and goes all psychedelic. That was super cool. What else? There's the bit where, spoiler alert, your partner in the game gives birth and you have to deal with that.
I didn't
But
get
you,
that.
oh, sorry, Siri. But you just have guns for hands, so how are you going to deliver a baby? Oh, shit. That was like something that we wanted to get in there from very early on. But I'm just thinking back, like, was there anything that we had to cut? We wanted to have weapon switching in the car chase so that, there would be different targets that would come at you and you'd have to use like the shotgun or the pistol or the SMG in different situations, but it ended up being a bit too buggy. Apart from that, like, love it or hate it, because like the American Dream, the game is already like pretty divisive, but I think the ending is extra divisive. Some people absolutely hate it. Like we got a lot of flack for it, but some people love it. Love it or hate it. I think the ending of the game is quite true to what we wanted to achieve. So I don't think we really compromised much there. It's just that we didn't have enough time and we weren't able to polish it as much as the other parts of the game.
Even though guns are used throughout every level of the game, the final level and the few levels leading up to it are really the only levels where you're using the guns to fight someone, deal harm, or attack an enemy. Are you able to tell me a bit about your decision to structure the levels in that way?
Yeah. So one of the original concepts for the progression of the story was having the tone start as the American Dream and kind of progress to become like the American Nightmare, where it becomes this like horrific, like more. I guess it's looking at the optimistic side of guns to then more of the pessimistic side. And obviously like the execution like kind of shifted over time, but like thinking back now, like I never wanted to wholeheartedly condemn the attitude of like pro gun ownership, because obviously like to the rest of the world it feels over the top, but kind of going on the journey of like developing the story, like I felt like I kind of empathized with the people who end up loving guns. So the progression of the narrative kind of came to be like, we love guns. Guns are cool. Guns are awesome. They helped us win many wars. They helped like win. It helped America win their freedom from the UK, and that was a huge part of history and why they're so entrenched in American history. And yeah, like even though they're weapons, they have done good in some ways, but then the enthusiasm around them, like depicted in the story, is about how we love guns. Everybody should get guns. Oh no! Oh no! Now everybody has guns. The world is kind of more dangerous now, but we can make tons of money. But we can't stop this machine from going, so we better just keep getting more and more guns out there. And I guess we wanted to paint like the BioShock like dystopian future where if everybody in the world had guns and everybody saw like the world as their target, things around the world as their target, target range, what kind of chaos would come out of that? And inevitably, like if everyone has guns, someone's going to come in and try to overpower you with their firepower, and then the game kind of culminates in what God, it's been a while. Another spoiler warning, but the narrator of the game, Buddy Washington, being like, "You're, the most powerful gunman in all of America," you've helped us to achieve so much, but now I need to usurp you to become the most powerful like gunman in America. So I'm gonna send all my guns against your guns and let's fight. Because yeah, at the end of the day, it is about who is more powerful than the other, and it's literally an arms race at the end. So yeah, it felt like the logical conclusion. Looking back, I don't know if it was necessarily the right thing to do because of how polarizing the ending was. But I think when I hear that people do get it and they do appreciate what we were trying to achieve, like that's reassuring at least. So at the end of the day, like, if we were a more skilled and more experienced developer, maybe we would have just done it better, but not different. At the end of the day, I'm still pretty happy with how it turned out. But yeah, I don't know. When you make a game about a topic like this, you're gonna piss people off. I guess that's just inevitable.
I liked the mixing of the game world and then also the real video with Buddy's speech at the end. What inspired you to do the speech in that way? And also, what sort of issues, if any, did you run into with doing it in that way?
The genesis of that part of the game is very indie. I look back fondly on it. People would probably tell me I'm fucking stupid for doing it, but here's what happened. So I wrote the script for the finale, and there's a big monologue, a big like Metal Gear Solid-esque monologue, and I refined the script, made it as good as I thought it would get, and then we got it recorded. And then it turns out that the monologue went for like 5 to 10 minutes. I can't remember exactly how long, but it was really long. And I'm like, oh my God, I did not realize it would be this long. We can't make like unique gameplay for this sequence for like 10 minutes where this guy is just talking. And we can't make an in-game cinematic that is going to last, 10 minutes. And I think at this point we had maybe a month left in development. And I decided the player can't just sit there doing nothing and just staring at a wall. They have to have something to look at least. So I was like, all right, we're going to film a video because at least there's something to watch. And I think what happened was, I'm not sure if we had the dog mask already, but I guess we got a dog mask. I put that on. It was a Saturday. So we're already working overtime, and I had to go into the office on a Saturday, I think by myself. I don't think there was anyone else working that day. It also happened to be I think like 38-degree day Celsius. So I don't know what that converts to. Probably like, I think it's like 70, 80 something. Really hot though. And the air conditioning in the office was not working that day either. So I basically filmed myself acting out the speech. So the person under the mask is me in 38-degree heat, doing it in like, I think I did it in like 1 or 2 takes. And yeah, I mean, it was fun, like acting it out and doing this like, really like over the top, like body acting. At the end of the day, the player still has to sit there and watch like a 10-minute video or something, which I don't think is ideal, but the mixed media is kind of fun. I'm overall just happy that we could do something so weird and like last minute, because it really came together at like kind of the last minute as well. But yeah, we couldn't afford to make gameplay that lasted 10 minutes. We couldn't afford to do cinematics that lasted 10 minutes. The cheapest thing we could do was film myself, in a dog costume doing the speech.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced while working on the American Dream?
I mean, for me, the biggest challenge was writing the script and just wanting to do right by the topic. But for the rest of the team, developing in VR was really challenging. Obviously, you have to spend a lot of time with the headset on, and playtesting is really difficult, and finding bugs is extra difficult. It involves, a lot of eye strain. You got to like move your hands around a lot and do stuff, which is pretty tiring for game developers who are usually just sitting at the desk all day. What else? the team struggled with how much things were changing. So I think like I could admit that it was a difficult development for the team because of the way that the creative direction like shifted. Because like I said, it started off as like ha 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 Australians' perspective on the gun debate to no, I want to actually properly understand what's going on here and give like as detailed and as honest of a reflection on the debate as possible. So a lot changed, and there was a lot of content added, which meant more work and more bug testing for the team. So yeah, I think just making a game that deals with a controversial topic is really difficult. Doing it in a new medium, extra difficult. Comedy games also really difficult because you know everyone's going to have a slightly different sense of humor, and yeah, you can't just monologue at the player, which we kind of learned because there are times when it's just a monologue at the player, but we needed to get like gameplay comedy in there as well, which was really difficult but really fun. I think the gameplay comedy that we came up with, I'm really quite proud of, and I think that was like the most like universally like praised part of the game. But yeah, some things are just really hard to communicate with gameplay, and that's when it's just it's the character talking, like communicating a joke. Yeah, I guess also the fact that the player has no voice, there's no back and forth, which makes the comedy a bit harder too. But yeah, I think we did okay considering we were doing so many things for the first time ever.
With the controversial nature of the game and the subjects discussed in the game pokes fun at some of the people in America who are quick to aggression and can get very angry when they are made fun of. Have you received much hate from that group?
We were really worried about it because I guess people can get pretty passionate on the internet. But honestly, like the worst we ever got was like this game sucks, or like I don't know, like they just people just said didn't like this game, it's dumb, it's not giving a good take, or blah blah blah. That's okay. That's just your opinion, man. Nobody threatened to kill us, so that was good. I'm not sure like whether like how much of it is like the end product or how much of it is maybe the game just didn't get popular enough for there to be like hordes of like mad people. Because usually it's the more popular you are, the more angry mobs you get. But I think in general, what I found is there are people on like both sides of the gun debate that love the game, and that I'm actually quite proud of. Because there are some people who are like, the gun situation is terrible in America. It makes me really sad, but this game is like a great satire on it and can make me laugh about it at least. And then there are some people who are like, I fucking love guns. Guns are sweet. And this game lets me live my everyday life with guns. This is really funny. And I guess they appreciate, the jokes because, the jokes go both ways too. So I'm glad that we were able to achieve that. So maybe the way that the story and the content was handled meant that it, like I didn't want to just piss off like a particular person. I wanted to look at the picture as a whole. So yeah, the worst we got was some people like the game's not good, the game's boring, too much talking, which in retrospect I kind of agree with on the too much talking, but some people have enjoyed it a lot, so it's just not for everyone, I guess.
Before we started the interview, you talked a little about having issue with the release date. Can you dive a little into that?
Yeah, I guess because the game is totally about guns in America and a satire about it, we were worried that if there were like a mass shooting event around the timing of our launch, that people would be reluctant to support or have anything to do with our game, because it would be in really bad taste. Like if there was a mass shooting and this game came out on the same day, we wouldn't feel that it was appropriate either. But the way that your game releases work, if you pick a date, it's not easy to change that date. So I guess we were worried, like, is something going to happen around the time of release? Yeah, like unfortunately, I think on the week, I think, of the release, there was a mass shooting, not on the same day, but like, I guess the reality is the mass shootings are way more common than they should be. Like, they seem to happen every other week anyway. But we did run into some issues because some of the platforms and some press were like a bit reluctant to cover the game. So I can't get into details, but you can kind of imagine that it wasn't easy getting coverage. But at the end of the day, that was what we bought into when we entered the conversation, I guess. But yeah, I guess every step of the way, like, we had a relaunch, we had a port of the game released on MetaQuest, and that was like, again, we had to be strategic about the timing, like, try to make sure that it's not happening, not coming out in the midst of like some serious gun controversy. Yeah. There was actually, though, I think I can kind of talk about this because it was kind of known, but yeah, I think a few months before our launch, I think there was a particularly bad mass shooting that then prompted all the console platforms to discourage promoting shooting games. So I don't know if people in the audience noticed, but I think sometime in late 2017 or early 2018, the game platforms were like, we're just gonna hold off on promoting shooter games for a while, because I mean, let's be honest, they sell anyway. They sell whether or not they're promoted on the front page. But specifically, the gaming platforms, and I think maybe the media a little bit, were kind of stepping away from promoting shooters for a while. But it was they were kind of waiting till the heat died down, and now it's back to normal. But that was a bit concerning, being in the midst of that, because we're like, oh Jesus, our game is totally about gun culture. Like, are they just going to block us entirely? We weren't sure.
Looking back now, if you could go back and remake a part of the game or tell yourself something at the beginning of the game, what would you do differently?
I would get an editor for the script to help trim it down. And then, knowing that reading a script is not the same as hearing it read aloud by or acted out by a voice actor, I would have made the script shorter, because there are sequences where you just kind of sit and you listen to them talk, and not everyone is going to be paying attention, so they're not getting the full kind of experience anyway. So would have done that. Yeah, apart from that, like, I think we got in most of what we wanted. I think it would have been great if there was more time to finish the content of the game and then sit with it for a bit and then see what parts we could trim out to just tighten the pacing and help people get to the end of the game. Because I mean, what released is almost like, I wouldn't say like a first draft, but like, we didn't have much of an opportunity to refine the pacing. It's just kind of like, here's what we want to say, here's the gameplay that we want, it's all in, it works well enough, blah, game's released. So would have trimmed, refined, but otherwise, wouldn't have changed too much else.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been great interviewing you.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
And that was the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss another one. Also, consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you think a friend might like the show, make sure to share it with them. And if you want to stay up to date with what's going on with Game Design Hour, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at Game Design Hour. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.